Hello, this is Mark from Enchantment of Eternity here, and I usually do these quick review videos on shows that I've seen. Try to make it completely spoiler free, but there's a lot of shows I watched this year, and I keep scheduling to do a quick review, but then I get too busy with too many other videos, and I keep putting it off, and it gotten to the point where I had to just scrap them all together. So what I thought I'd do is come on real quick, because I do want to talk about these shows that I watched, and just very quickly talk about some 6 shows that I watched this year, and just give my quick review. And this video will be completely spoiler free, so you wouldn't have to have seen any of these shows. Nothing will be spoiled for you. So let me start with the first show, Love, Death, and Robots, which I love the trailer for the show more than anything. I watched this trailer on repeat, even before and after I've seen the show, and I'm almost going to say the trailer is my favorite part of this show. I just think it's so, artistic. It's one of the best trailers for a show I've ever seen. But the actual show is the anthology, an animated anthology. It has, I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that it was inspired by the film Heavy Metal, which was also an animated anthology. But this is basically, I would almost call it a collection of short films rather than a TV show, because each episode is about 6 to 12 minutes long, so it's quite short. And there's varying degrees, and every episode has a varying degrees of animation. There's all kinds of animation. You got the CGI type animation, you have video game type animation, you have classic Disney type animation, and then you have more just all different kinds. And most of it's very artistic, it's very violent, and a lot of it's very sexually driven, so it's a very adult, sort of on edge, what you would think of Heavy Metal. And I thought this was an interesting show. My favorite episode was probably the comedy episode that I think was about 3 robots in the future. I thought it was hilarious. Now, not every episode has to do with robots specifically, but it's just a generalized theme that most of it is quite sci-fi and futuristic. And some of the episodes are a bit more artistic, a bit more abstract, where others play out has typical action vignettes, and those are probably the ones I appreciate the least. So yeah, I mean, there was a couple episodes I outright didn't like. There was another comedy episode I thought was not funny and not very good, but there was there's action, horror, all types of genre, all types of animation, and for the most part, most of the episodes I thought were just okay. As I said, there was a few that rised above that I really liked, and there was a few that went below that that I really didn't like. But if that psychedelic animation is your thing, I would recommend checking this out. So my rating for Love, Death, and Robots out of 10 is a 7. Very good. So another show I want to talk about is Hannah. I watched that when I first moved to the U.S. This year, when I was feeling very sick from the jet lag. And I had nothing to do. I was lying in bed, so I watched this Amazon Prime. It was being heavily promoted. I couldn't turn it on TV without seeing a commercial for the damn thing, and it actually got me hooked. Now, I remember watching this movie called Hannah, which I did not like, but apparently it was based off a book, and the show is based off the book, and this happens a lot with books, is that when they try to adapt it to a movie, it doesn't work because it's too much material. And so it did work as a show, and I actually did really enjoy this show. It had that guy who played Rick Flag from Suicide Squad, and he was also in the sci-fi show on Netflix. Name escaping me at the moment, but I actually didn't care for that show. A lot of people liked it, but I didn't. But he was in this, and I thought he was actually a really damn good actor. I thought he did a damn good job in this. So Hannah was about she was a genetically enhanced super killer or assassin, whatever, from a baby, and it was raised by this trained assassin in isolation, like in the forest. But then something happens when she's a teenager, and they have to go out in hiding, and the government agents are hunting for them, trying to kill them or trying to collect the girl because considers her their property or whatever. And she has like these interactions with like the real world, which would never been involved because she lived her whole life in isolation with her father. And meanwhile, her father's off doing, assassin things and reconnecting with old friends, trying to protect her from the government agents, the evil corporate agents, whoever they were, trying to capture her. And the reason why I think it worked a lot better in the movies is because this television show had time to flesh out the characters a lot more and get you invested in the characters. And that's what I thought this show's biggest draw was not, the assassin stuff and the action scenes and the thriller things. That was all the intrigue, spy aspect of it. That was all interesting. But to me, what really made the show is seeing this young girl who has these, abilities to kill people trying to become human and interacting with like other teenage girls her age and stuff like that, and learning what it means to be a human being, and balancing that with her assassin side. So I really love that. So my rating for Hannah season 1 out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good. I can't wait for season 2. So that one was on Amazon Prime. Anyway, we get to the next episode, which is Cheronbyl. I wasn't going to watch the show. When I was watching Game of Thrones, this was heavily advertised. And it's because it's on HBO. And I wasn't going to watch it because, to be honest, it looked a bit boring to me. Because HBO had a couple of movies and shows that are based off of real-life events that I thought were kind of dull. But so many people were raving about it. And my brother in particular recommended this one to me. So I went ahead and watched it, and I was blown away by it. I was actually really impressed at how engaging that it was, and how, because most people know about the events at Chernobyl, the the nuclear accident or whatever that happened in the 80s in the Soviet Union and Ukraine, but I never studied. I didn't know the details about this, and this is a very strong cautionary tale about governments or peoples in general, societies that try to deny a problem that is a problem because they don't want it to be a problem, so they try to pretend it's not a problem, and it just makes it work and worse. And then a few people who are experts in this field push because they know that it is a problem and they're able to deal with it, but they're only able to deal with it to a certain extent because it's already gotten worse from people denying it. I think you're kind of getting out the analogy I'm making here, and I think the show makes this analogy quite obviously, because I've talked to a few people who watch the show and their instinct was to be like, oh, the Soviet Union was really fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, but if that's, I'm not denying that. And the Soviet Union's reaction to Chernobyl was a huge, part of the show. In fact, Putin apparently was very much against the show, and apparently he bankrolled a Russian show that tried to say Chernobyl was all the U.S.'s fault. To try to find, because it's all about propaganda. But anyway, so it's true if you get that takeaway. But I think if that's your only takeaway from the show, you're missing the point. It's not about the Soviet. It is about the Soviet Union specifically, but it's not saying it could only happen there. It could happen anywhere. In other situations, I think you know what I'm talking about, where people deny a problem that exists because they don't want to exist, and it ends up getting worse, becoming a much bigger problem. And of course, it had what's his face dude who plays Dolls, and he did an amazing job. And what I really like is that he's barely in the first episode at all. He appears in like 5 minutes or less of the first episode, but then he becomes the main character later. Because I love how the show doesn't tie itself to that. It just does what's necessary for the story, and the way it's paced is actually quite perfect. So I was actually blown away with how powerful the show was and how much you do connect to the character. So big recommend for me. So my rating for Chernobyl out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. So next I want to talk about The Boys, another Amazon show. I did a live discussion with this for the show with Don Willie and Darren from D's Reviews. The first half hour of that discussion is spoiler free, so even if you haven't seen the show, if you want to learn more about it, you can definitely check out that discussion. Now, this is another show that was just heavily advertised. I think Amazon's been heavily advertising the shows, and I just saw trailer after trailer and finally went and watched it. And because usually I'm not a huge superhero guy, and I usually don't watch many superhero shows. But this one was made it very clear that it was not your average superhero show. In fact, the whole point of it was based off a comic book where apparently the author of the comic hates superheroes. And that comes off very clearly in the trailers, that basically, because the show is about how corrupt superheroes would be, it was trying to have a more realistic version of how corrupt superheroes would be if they were integrated into corporate American culture. So basically, it's a corporation runs the Seven, which is their version of the Justice League or the Avengers. I mean, I think any one-to-one comparison is off. I think they definitely take elements of both of those. But a corporation runs this league of superheroes called the Seven, and it shows how corrupt they would be, and how the superheroes are just normal people, and how having that much power and that much celebrity would corrupt anyone, and not everyone, because not every single superhero is an asshole, but enough of them are. Like, this whole system that runs the superhero is corrupt. So the show's about a group of vigilantes who are non-superpowered, who all have been harmed or wronged in some way by this specific group of superheroes, getting together and trying to bring them down. Now, whether that means kill them or arrest them or whatever, their main goal is to take them down. And these vigilantes themselves are not shown as, bastions of good or superheroes. They're all shades of gray. That's the best thing about this show, is that every character in this show is a shade of gray. There's definitely characters that lean more towards your protagonist and more towards your antagonist, but there's no bastion of good or bastion of evil. There's definitely a strong mix, and even there's a couple of characters that I would say come close to being evil, pure evil, but even they have some relatable aspects to them, and that's what makes this show so great. Now, this show is ultra violent, and sometimes the violence is way over the top. So I wouldn't say it's always a comedy, because sometimes it can get quite serious. There's like one scene in particular in the show which I think is the most powerful dramatic scene I've seen all year in any show or film. So it's not like it's always lighthearted, but some of the scenes you do have to take a bit with a grain of salt, that are a bit tongue-in-cheek, and sometimes it is a satire, and it does play a bit loose. If you've seen, my first introduction with the trailer that showed, Carl Urban, who's plays the main character of The Boys in this film, who's great in this show. The first trailer I saw showed him holding a baby, shooting laser out of his eyes, and he was killing people with his baby that was shooting laser out of his eyes, and he was just like, "That's diabolical!" And so you gotta come into the show expecting that sort of over the top grittiness, and sort of take it for what it is. But I think it has within that context, it has some very strong characters, strong themes. I love the political satire of how really going after corporate America. Anyway, my rating for The Boys Season 1 out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. Let me get into the next show, which is Mindhunter. Now, I actually saw Mindhunter Season 1 I think last year, but it came out 2 years ago, so I was about a year late, so I never did a video for it. But Season 2 just came out this year, just last month, I think. And so I watched that. I binge-watched Mindhunter Season 2. It's been a while since I've seen Season 1. I didn't rewatch it. But this is a pretty great show. Now, this is directed by David Fincher, who's, I believe, the showrunner. And it's all about, based off of real-life events, all about FBI agents who sort of who sort of came up with the term serial killer. The first ones who really studied serial killers, and they sort of wrote the book, so to speak, on serial killers and began like profiling them. So the show is very, very slow paced and mostly deals with, these FBI agents going to prisons and interviewing serial killers, and it's based off real life events, so they base them off real life serial killers. I believe in season 2 they had Son of Sam and Charles Manson, but the main focus of the season was a serial killer in Atlanta who I was not familiar with. So it was interesting. It was about them, the FBI agents. Not only do they interview serial killers, but they try to take what they learn from interviewing the serial killers to create profiles in order to catch current serial killers at large. And this season 2 is taking place mostly in 81, I think. It's like 79 through 81, I believe. Season 1 was mostly just in the 70s. And it is mostly based off real life events. Of course, like any nonfiction show, they do take some liberties. Specifically, the characters, the main FBI characters, are based off of real life people, but they're not really. Like, they changed their names and definitely have personal lives that have nothing to do with the real life people. But I did think season 2 was... Actually, I think I liked it better in season 1, to be honest, because I was kind of lukewarm on the show. I liked it in season 1, but I don't know, it was a bit too slow paced to me. But season 2 was a lot more sort of character based, in my opinion, where it wasn't just about the serial killers. It was about the personal lives of these people who work for the FBI, these profilers, and how they relate this to present day and learn about the culture. So I thought it was quite powerful. So my rating for Mindhunter out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good. Alright, so next we'll get into Dark, the last show I'll cover. This is a show that was recommended to me a couple years ago when season 1 came out, but I never got around to watching it until my brother, he watched it and did a review and got really into it, and after seeing his spoiler-free review, I was like, oh, I better check it out. So when I was sick a couple weeks ago, I just sat and watched season 1 all in one day, and over the next week I watched season 2, which season 2 just came out this past month. So I watched season 1 and 2 together, and this show is it's a German show about time travel. It's about a small town where they found there's these caves, spooky caves, where people, there's like a time portal in there, and sometimes people time travel. Now, that's pretty much all I can say in any specifics without getting pretty heavy into spoilers, because I can't. This is a show that's hard to talk about with avoiding spoilers. But I will say that it is very intricate. It is very complex. I don't want to use the word convoluted, but the word convoluted keeps coming to my mind. But convoluted has negative connotations, and I don't want to imply anything negative about that way, but it is extremely complex. I did find, as I was watching the show, and it probably has to do with the fact that I just binge watched 2 seasons over a week, where most people probably, even though it's on Netflix and some people binge watch it, a lot of people probably take their time with it, particularly between season 1 and season 2. People had to wait 2 years and had time to process this, talk about theories, and really dig deep into it, where I just kind of just joined right in. And there's so many different characters. There's several different time periods. It starts out just in the present day, but then as the show progresses, it introduces several more time periods where people time travel to. And so you have, not only do you have a variety of different characters that live in this small town and the families and who they're related to, but as you go in different time periods, you get the younger versions of themselves, or the older versions of themselves, or you get their grandparents, or you get like other characters who lived in that time period who were dead by the time we get to 2019. So you get more characters, so it becomes such an influx of so many different characters and such as an intricate web. I actually very impressed with the creators of the show to create something so complex and mind-bending. And I guess my only complaint is I did find a hard time keeping up with this sometimes. In fact, when I was watching season 2, I had to go online and open up a family tree that lists all the characters and the relations to everyone and what they look like in their past selves, because sometimes I couldn't I saw someone in a different timeline and it was their past selves, and I was like, who's that person when they're older? I can't. They try to flash it and tell you who's who, but it happens so fast. It's like I can't. It was very hard to keep up with. But once I got out that family tree and I was like, oh, okay, so that person's that person. They're related to this person, and when they're younger, they're that person. It's a very complex thing. So if that's not your thing, you might just be really confused and don't want to deal with it. But if you do love complex stories like that, especially involving time travel, I think this is probably one of the best stories involving time travel I've ever seen. It's one of the most unique and complex way to use time travel, because I love time travel movies. But most time travel movies are rather simplistic because they have to be, because it's only a 2-hour movie. They can't, if they try to get too complex, it end up turning out like Terminator Genesis, where it's just a fucking mess. But a show like this, which has 8 episodes a season, are able to go and deep dive into much more details. And I heard that it has been renewed for season 3, which they have, the showrunners themselves have determined will be the final season, because they have a specific story. And I love that, because my only worry after season 2 was that things have gotten so complex and overrun that if they try to keep the show running forever, it will get convoluted and they'll run out of things to do. So I love how it is going to be finite, and they do have a specific ending in mind, so I can't wait to see that. So anyway, my rating for Dark seasons 1 and 2 is a 9. Excellent. Alright, so that's it. So those are just the 6 shows I just want to talk about real quick. I would highly recommend watching all 6 of these to various degrees. According to my review, you could probably figure that one out for yourself. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to check out my channel, as I do many more videos on shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.